Today, we're going to break down one of the most incredible economic stories in modern history: how China went from a poor, mostly agricultural society to a global financial powerhouse in basically a single generation. So let's start right here with this number. In 1980, this was the size of China's entire economy. And to give you some perspective on that, it was actually smaller than the economy of the Netherlands at the time. Okay, now fast forward to 2023. The economy had just skyrocketed to this. I mean, that's a nearly 100-fold increase in just over 4 decades. It's an absolutely mind-boggling leap. But this might be the most important number of all. It represents the more than 800 million people who were lifted out of extreme poverty during that same time. It's the largest and fastest poverty reduction in all of human history. So this all raises one giant question, right? How on earth was this even possible? What was the formula they used? All right, let's dive in and unpack this. So our story really kicks off in the late 1970s. After decades of really rigid state control, China's leaders knew they needed a radical new game plan. And this was the spark that would light the fuse on 40 years of explosive growth. And the playbook they came up with was called Reform and Opening Up. Led by Deng Xiaoping, the central idea was pretty revolutionary: introduce market forces and open up to foreign trade, but do it without completely tearing down the state-controlled system. It was this really pragmatic, step-by-step experiment. And it basically rolled out in 3 key steps. First, they freed the farmers. They decollectivized agriculture, letting farmers sell any surplus for a profit. And boom, that immediately boosted food production and freed up a ton of labor for new industries. Second, they created these test labs for capitalism. We'll get to those in a second. And third, they allowed for a dual-track system where new private businesses could literally grow right alongside the old state-owned firms. And this brings us to those test labs, special economic zones, or SEZs. Just think of them as these little isolated capitalist experiments inside a communist country. They offered huge tax breaks and cheap land to lure in foreign companies, and just as importantly, their technology. They were a super crucial testing ground. And the results? They were absolutely stunning. This quote about Shenzhen just says it all. These zones became these supercharged magnets for money, for manufacturing, and for growth, transforming tiny little coastal towns into some of the biggest cities on the entire planet. So, how did this initial spark catch fire and lead to the next phase? Well, with these reforms in place, China was ready to leverage its greatest asset, its huge population. The goal? To turn the country into the world's workshop. Now, a really crucial ingredient here was a sky-high domestic savings rate. I mean, while Americans were saving less than 10% of their income, Chinese households were socking away around 40%. This created this massive, internally funded pool of cash ready for investment. So where did all that cash go? Well, the government basically directed this river of savings into an absolute obsession with building. They funded the construction of roads, ports, railways, and airports at a speed the world had just never seen before. And this timeline really shows you the insane scale of it. Over just 30 years, China builds out this world-class network that made it incredibly efficient to move goods from factories deep inland out to coastal ports. They were literally laying the physical groundwork to become a manufacturing superpower. So you've got this massive labor force, you've got brand new infrastructure, and then came the final piece: joining the World Trade Organization, the WTO, in 2001. That gave them low-tariff access to global markets, and the floodgates just opened. China cemented its role as the undisputed world's factory. But here's the thing. The strategy couldn't just be about making cheap t-shirts and toys forever. To keep the growth engine running, China had to start moving up the value chain, from just assembling products to actually inventing them. And this huge pivot was powered by people. China went on this massive expansion of higher education. Just look at this. They went from about 1 million college graduates a year in 2000 to over 11 million by 2023. They were creating this giant talent pool of engineers and scientists. And this new talent was backed by a huge surge in research and development spending. As a chunk of its economy, R&D spending more than doubled, making China's total R&D budget second only to the United States in the entire world. So the old model of copy and reverse engineer foreign tech slowly started to evolve. Backed by some aggressive state industrial policy, Chinese companies, think Huawei, BYD, and CAT-TL, went from being followers to becoming global leaders in these key future-facing technologies. Okay, so this incredible growth was the result of a very specific and pretty unique formula. But, and this is a big but, achieving that kind of speed in just one generation came with some very, very significant trade-offs. This whole story wasn't magic. The relentless, all-out focus on growth created some serious challenges that the country is still grappling with today. Everything from heavy air pollution and massive corporate debt to a huge real estate bubble that is now, well, deflating. So if you're going to take away one thing, it should be this complete recipe. It wasn't just one thing. It was this unique combination of 6 key ingredients all happening at the same time and at the scale of 1.4 billion people. No other country has ever combined all of these factors at once like this. And that leaves us with a final massive question. This formula, it worked brilliantly for 4 decades. But now, with growth slowing, the population getting older, and new geopolitical challenges popping up, the big question is whether this remarkable formula for success has a shelf life.